Welcome back.
F1 Talk, the first race of the season, Bahrain. Lots to talk about today.
Yeah, I think so.
Don't mind.
We have
audience.
a special guest here.
There was displeasure with the results today for one of us. Do not be fooled by the shirt that I'm wearing. It's a great shirt, but it's in honor of a great race for Red Bull today.
Same with my shirt. I chose red. I think Formula One is a great sport to watch because you don't necessarily have a favorite. Whereas baseball, we have our favorite team. Football, maybe we have a favorite team. But Formula One, it's like I like everyone.
Favorite driver.
Maybe favorite driver, but I'm not typically rooting for Ferrari, but the fact that they came back this season, first race of the season with a 1-2, freaking amazing. So I'm wearing red in honor with Ferrari.
No, and I think you're right. I think you can pick a favorite driver, but once the race starts, there's so many heroes that emerge in the middle of the race that you start rooting for. K-Mag being one of those, but we'll get to that.
Right, and it's just who does the best. You're like, oh, okay, wow, that's great.
I do want to start with the Formula One app update.
Oh, my goodness.
I heard it was updated. I wasn't really sure. I didn't really care to double check it. But once I checked it, and I'll show you guys later, the data screen is actually pretty incredible on it. And the track itself, when you can track the cars going around, is also pretty incredible. But one big change is when the race started, we were all kind of shocked and disappointed that Crofty was not the commentator.
Where is Crofty?
It was so stressful. It's almost like I couldn't enjoy the race because the voice that I've just come to know and love was not there.
Whoever was commentating, though, you can't use "it's lights out and away we go."
I know.
It was terrible.
It's not the same.
It was bad. Fortunately, about 30 laps in, the stress was too much to take. I looked online, see what happened to Crofty, realized that the F1 app now has a button that you can switch the commentator to international, which is where you will find Crofty doing his thing on the race. And the other option was the F1 Live, which sucks.
Yeah.
Sucks major balls.
But you know what sucks leads me into my next segue. The biggest upset today, not even Red Bull, but what is going on at McLaren?
Jesus was not watching this race for them.
No. And it's one thing, after watching Drive to Survive, I don't like Lando as much as I thought I did. But I'm glad that Ricciardo finished in front of Lando, but still, what was it, like 16 and 17? Like, what is going on?
I think one of the things we read about or noticed that Netflix takes a little bit of creative freedom when they put together these videos for Drive to Survive when they film it. So I have read that some things are kind of taken out of context. However, I see what you're saying about Lando. He has some sly comments, and I'm kind of noticing now more what he does. I appreciate that he does have that fighting in it, a little bit of snobbiness. Yeah. I think you kind of need that. But you're right. He didn't come across as likable as we would like him to be.
Right.
I would say that Ricciardo did struggle last season, and it was a lot of hope for this season for him to not struggle. To see him both McLarens at the back was kind of shocking.
Absolutely.
The thing with the Lando, I think you were saying, I appreciate his attitude towards it. I think what you were alluding to is the fact that he felt no sympathy for how Daniel Ricciardo was performing poorly at the beginning of the season.
Right.
And then he got his contract extension. They announced it in the garage to the entire team, and then he's still saying, well, I don't, why should I hold his hand?
Right. Well, ultimately, it's one thing to not feel sympathy. It's another thing to tell a reporter, like, no, I could care less. Like, keep that stuff to yourself. I don't see why that's important to say that. Like, it's just going to make you less likable in the paddock, or not paddock, but in the garages. And it's going to cause an even bigger issue between you and the drivers. Just shut up.
But let's face it, though, that's kind of the tea that we like for Formula One. The reason why it's so exciting, the pettiness that goes around in a lot of this stuff, it's next level, and I love it.
Right. Yeah, I guess that's true.
But where do they finish this race?
I think like 16 and 17. No, I'm sorry, 14 and 15.
Oh, 14, 15.
Okay.
Better than the 16, 17 we thought.
But Ricciardo still did better, and that's all I care about. Even if it's 19 and 20, as long as Ricciardo's 19 and Norris is 20, I'm happy.
So they both finished almost a minute behind. Who cares?
No, because you know what? Ricciardo should feel no sympathy.
As a sponsor such as Google, I guess any sponsor, at what point do you jump off the ship? I know this is just the first race, but a 14-15 finish for the team is not so good, especially for a team that's sponsored by Android and Google.
For me, is McLaren is a big name. It's a big team, and both drivers are pretty popular. Ricardo is probably one of the most popular drivers on the grid as a whole. So I think the sponsorship has to do with the image that's going to come across. I think, you need to win. And I think if they consistently end up in the back of the pack as a sponsor, you probably don't want – you want the screen time. Right. That's the big deal, right? If you're at the back of the grid, you're probably not going to get a lot unless you're battling for 19th place. And who wants to watch a battle for 19th place?
Right.
They didn't have too many battles, McLaren did. They didn't have any battles in this race.
So I think it all comes down to screen time, airtime, and I think that's going to be the deciding factor for them.
Well, and do you guys think that the cars look slower this season?
I think perceptionally, I think they do look slower. We jumped into the international version of the F1 TV a little late, but from what I saw from the KPH or the MPH, it did seem a little bit slower on the straights. I didn't see too many 300-kilometer speeds, and I feel like they should have gotten 300 kilometers on the front straight. Yeah, there's a couple of straights that definitely could have picked it up. There's a couple of races that are later on in the season where they have the fastest tracks. We'll get to see Monza. We'll get to see the speeds, and we'll get to see if actually the car responds to it. But the look of the car, though sometimes people might say it's not that different and they all kind of look the same, there's a big noticeable difference on the vehicles and the shape of the vehicles. And you're right, in a couple of turns, when the camera shot was just right, they were coming right at you, it looks like they were just crawling.
Right.
So again, it's perception. I'm sure they're still fast.
I personally just don't even like the way the cars look.
It's just a new era. When they left the V8 era to jump to the V6 era, the V6 hybrid turbo era, people felt the same way. Yeah.
This is going to be an interesting season, definitely. I think what also is interesting is there was no accidents. Usually, first lap, there's a bunch of accidents. There's a bunch of nobody touched.
Well, there was a spin out at the beginning. There was one spin out at the beginning. Albon got Albon that got the penalty 5 seconds?
No, Ocon.
Ocon, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. But I mean, ultimately, there was no DNFs due to accidents.
Right.
All the DNFs were done all by themselves.
Yeah, especially for this track. I think the first turn lends itself to a little bit of contact with vehicles, and we had none of that. So, that's good for racing. As a fan, you kind of want to see a little bit more excitement. But all in all, I think it was a great race, though.
I mean, and those Red Bulls, they've done a great job today.
I don't know what the issue was. The fact that the Toro Rosso car caught on fire, and someone said probably a software issue. And then you get Max's car, and then followed by Sergio's just completely shutting down and spinning out. It's going to be interesting what they do, because what are the odds that happened at the end of the race?
Right.
Yeah, is it a longevity issue? But the thing is, if it's an electronic issue, I feel like that's easily fixed. If it was a mechanical issue, then that more is a longevity issue. Right. But the fact that, you're right, Gasly went out first due to a hardware or mechanical issue, electrical issue, and then Max. And then the lap after, Sergio's power just cut off into a turn and he spun out.
Right.
That was like the second to last lap.
It's interesting. I'm hoping that they can't figure it out, and next race something similar happens. But that's just me and my wishful thinking.
Some might say it's karma.
Some might say it's karma.
I would never say that, but some might say it's karma.
The race gods are looking at Max Verstappen and said, what did you think was going to happen?
It's a lot harder to win again when you're not an F1 champion, but an FIA champion.
And I think and maybe you guys noticed this as well. When they talk about Lewis Hamilton, they're always like former 7-time world champion, or when they talk about Sebastian Vettel, 2-time world champion, or four times, or Alonso, they're like 2 times world champion. But when they talk about Max, they still just call him Max Verstappen. Like, they don't give him that credit. So it must be something
it's the first race of the season, though.
Right, but so they brought up Alonso being a 2-time Formula One champion.
And the only defense I have for that is that we didn't watch the international broadcast Crofty doing for the first 30 laps. But as far as the F1 TV live commentary, which sucks, by the way, Yeah, there was not a lot of fanfare for him. It was just Max Verstappen. And I think you're right. Every time we see a race, usually you see, reigning champion. This is the champion's time to lose. And there wasn't a lot of that for Max.
Right. And like you said, even Alonso, he was fighting with Ocon, and they were like, this is so weird for a 2-time world champion to be fighting his own teammate and not have that pace. It's like, it's interesting to see the dynamic in one world champion winner and another world champion winner.
And I will venture out to say that a lot of the drivers probably do not consider Max a true champion. Again, I know Netflix takes creative liberty, but after watching the last 3 episodes, it's pretty evident that everybody questions that win.
Yeah.
We haven't watched it yet, so.
Yeah, we haven't.
Yeah, somebody's lagging behind.
We're a little behind.
It makes no sense to me. I mean, I don't even know what else you're doing with your day.
Well, somebody who had a really good day today, Kevin Magnussen.
Yes.
Wow.
That was a shocking selection for a Haas driver to replace Nikita Mazepin.
Right.
It was interesting that there was a lot of choices. People talked about Nico Hulkenberg coming back. There was Fittipaldi was thrown in there. I mean, there's a lot of promising drivers and people with experience. I don't think K-Mag was ever a choice or someone that I thought of.
No, because I didn't think they liked each other.
It was very surprising when they announced him.
Yeah. I thought there was bad blood. I thought they didn't like each other. I mean, Drive to Survive made it seem like they didn't like each other.
I think the drivers had attitude. I don't think it's that they hated each other. I think it was all business on why they let the drivers go to bring in the money with the other 2 younger drivers. I'm sorry, go ahead and finish your
No, it's fine. Well, along with what you're saying, I think there's probably a lot of, I think as a driver, you probably get humbled when you lose your seat a little bit. So maybe coming back might be a bit more, okay, I guess I'm not as good as I thought I was. I don't have the power that I thought I did.
A little bit of an attitude adjustment.
But the fact that he came in and performed the way he did, I mean, the Haas getting points, much as that in 5th place.
Right. Well, and I guess it just puts it into perspective. Those teams who didn't do anything last season to fix the car, didn't spend any money last season, really are showing why they didn't do it, like Ferrari and Haas and those teams who didn't do anything. Now they're out here killing it. But also, I stick by this statement, I don't think Mick Schumacher should be in Formula One. I still think he should be in like Formula 2. But it kind of proves it. Kevin Magnussen, who hasn't been in Formula One his last season was 2020, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. So he wasn't in Formula One in 2021 at all. Comes back and races brand new and still does better than Mick Schumacher.
Well, it's probably why they brought him back, who was already on the team, is already familiar with the team, because you have someone who's so young in the sport, being Mick Schumacher. They had the pairing of 2 young drivers. I don't think really worked out for them.
Right, because there's nobody for direction.
Yeah, and part of it they brought them in for money, right?
Right.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
you really need a senior driver, someone who can really show you the ropes or kind of give that feedback to the team and to those engineers to make the car better. And then obviously the younger drivers learning at the same time through those actions.
Right.
I think you see that with most of those teams, and one of the biggest teams that has done that, I think, is Red Bull. They have their main driver in Max, and they're always trying to bring a younger driver to be the complement of that, and that hadn't worked out. And now they have Sergio Perez, and they can't imagine not having him there. So you have that experienced driver that's maybe a little level-headed or cool about it. I think you're right. I think that's why K-Mag was a good choice for Haas, and Mick can probably learn from that. But I'm going to have to agree with you. I don't think he's ready.
I didn't think granted, he brings money and he brings a big name, and that's great. I just don't think he was ready. And I said that last season too. And probably next season I'll say the same thing.
I want to ask that, would he be better in a different car? But with Kevin Magnussen finishing in 5th, I don't think it's the car. So I agree with you in that sense.
Yeah.
But I think if he were to be put onto a different team with a different car, I think he would do better. But would he be to the caliber that we're expecting?
Right.
I don't think so.
Right.
Well, I think some drivers, you can see the potential in them, given especially the car they're driving. As much as I hate him now, George Russell is one of them. You saw him in the Williams and how much better he did from his teammate throughout the season. So you can say, well, he's got potential. And you can see the same thing with Alex Albon and Latifi. The Albon comes in and somehow he's doing better than Latifi, kind of like Russell was doing. Actually, he might have done better than Russell in the race. Would have done in a Williams.
Right.
So I think at that point you're like, yeah, the potential is there for some drivers. Some drivers do not have that. And I think for Mick Schumacher, I don't think he's shown that potential
Right.
as a driver.
Well, something I noticed, even with all the regulation changes and the car changes, the top 3 teams are still the top 3 teams. So all these changes that they made to make it more fair haven't really changed the top 3.
It wasn't to make it fair. It was to have closer battles on track.
Okay, well,
I don't know if it
didn't
was
see that.
necessarily to make it fair, because some teams obviously still have more resources, and they try to do that doing the cost caps and, the amount of time that they can be on track and do all the
Right.
testing, things like that. But for the purposes of trying to make it closer driving and closer battle driving, I think it accomplished that, because there were several times where I'm like, once they're within that air pocket behind them, they were moving.
But the top 3 teams didn't change at all. Like, they
But
fought with each other,
They fought with each other.
which that we were already doing last season.
But look at Ferrari.
And I think it was closer
Ferrari
fights. What we're
wasn't
looking
last.
for is closer fights on it, which we did see a couple of examples of that today. But I think what you're saying is there were still people getting lapped like there were before. There was no closeness. So in theory, if you're in the back of the grid, you're fighting the back of the grid. You probably can continue to fight in the back of the grid, but you're not going to have a chance to catch up to the top of the grid.
Right, I think that's what I don't understand. Like, granted, yes, the fights were closer, but it's still with the same amount of people. What I was saying is just like the fights are with the same people. Like, the middle of the grid is fighting with the middle of the grid, the back of the grid is fighting with the back of the grid, and the top 3 teams are still fighting with each other. Now, Ferrari wasn't a top 3 team last season.
But they're in the mix now.
Right, but the season before they were a top 3 team. The top 3 teams are changing based off of just different situations. Like, last year they would have been a top 3 team had they spent the money to do so. So I don't think we can actually compare that. Like, usually the top 3 teams, for the last 10 years have been those top 3 teams. The only reason it changed last year was because of the way that they weren't going to.
Can you really consider them a top 3 team? Granted, I know they finished 3rd in the Constructors' Championship, but can you really consider them a top 3 team when they were 150 points less than Mercedes? Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, you have the top 2 teams who are far ahead of everyone else. Technically, they're still top 3, but they weren't really fighting with Mercedes. They were fighting with McLaren
But the
behind
top
them.
2 teams put the money in last season. The fact that Ferrari didn't put any money in last season and still finished 3rd, that's a top 3 team. It just depends on how you look at it. If you're looking at it, like, the fact that they still finished 3rd after not putting any money in, after all the other teams put money in, and then Ferrari, Red Bull, and Mercedes put money in, I mean, that makes them even more of a top 3 team, I feel like.
I see, and I see your point. I think, yes, they never had a chance to win a championship or constructors, but on the sheet, they're still the number 3 team to beat last season. I think McLaren was the top 3 the season before.
True, 2019.
2019.
I'm sorry, 2020.
2020, McLaren was the 3rd team, so the fight for the 3rd place was for Ferrari and them. Of course, Ferrari edged them out this last season. So now I think the top 3 are closer this season as of right now. And based on testing, McLaren was also in contention to be on the top 3 teams. So maybe this season we'll have a top 3, maybe top 4 teams that are going to be fighting for it.
Well, I mean, technically, Red Bull's not a top 3 team now, I guess, either. I mean,
Well,
because
it's the
they
first
didn't,
race.
they
Yeah,
didn't
so
score
they
any
finished,
goals.
yeah.
After the first race, yeah, definitely not.
They're definitely not. The only other thing that I can bring up is the fact that Hamilton got a podium by the hair on his chinny chin chin. Like, that's crazy. And like the fact that this is how you know he didn't expect anything, because he was just so happy to be involved when he got there. Like, he was just happy nobody on Red Bull made it on the podium. I think that's just where all his joy came from.
Yeah, right from the get, Mercedes made a comment that they weren't expecting to take a podium on this race and that the car needed some work and they were going to work on that. I don't know why. I mean, the devil works hard, but Lewis Hamilton works harder. It's kind of weird that everything kind of falls into place and he always just kind of manages to edge his way in there. He got 3rd place. He got a podium, which he didn't expect. So once again, luck is on his side. Whatever whatever devil he's praying to is working out for him just right.
Right.
I'm a little disappointed that Bottas didn't make it. I mean, I think he finished 6th, which is great.
Right.
Better than Alpha did last season. I still want him to do better than George Russell, and I hope he gets a podium before George Russell does this season. But again, this is the first race, and I think people are trying to figure out what's going on. I think the tire lasting longer. The comment was the mediums were lasting longer than they expected. I think that's based on the new car design. I think we're going to see some changes throughout the season. I expect Mercedes to continue to sandbag and come back in next race and start beating people.
Well, they said they're getting a whole bunch of new parts for the next race.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think as long as all the teams are doing that, I think we're going to see that the changes in the top 5 teams.
Yeah, hopefully.
And of course, McLaren still needs to come back.
Oh my goodness, that's going to be the upset of the season for me. Well, does anybody have anything else?
No, I'm very excited about the season. It's a great first race. There was a lot of excitement. Again, Ferrari taking 1-2 was unexpected, but
absolutely.
A wonderful, wonderful surprise. The drama at the end of it was fantastic. And once again, Haas taking points and finishing 5th place. That was...
Did both their drivers end up in the points?
No, Mick ended up in
Schumacher
11th,
right?
Yeah.
He
Which
was
is probably
close.
better than he's finished before. So
Right, he was
again,
close.
It was close.
He did his little hardest.
Yeah.
But both Alpha cars actually got into the points.
Yeah, good for and that was one of the things I was worried about Bottas going to Alfa Romeo because they were such a bottom team last season. But who knows?
Well, and you made the comment during the race. He probably is happier because he doesn't have the pressure. His assignment is different than it was with Mercedes, so he's probably a happier driver, and he might do great things.
Yeah.
So the second Bahrain where the rookie Asian drivers scored their first points in their first race, because it was Sonoda that raced Bahrain last year, and he got his first points.
Oh.
And then, is it Zhou? Zhou.
Zoe
I
or
think Zoe.
Sue?
It's Zhou, I think.
Okay.
We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out.
We have a lot of races to figure it out.
But he
I
got
think
his
that's-
first points too, so that's
That's
very nice.
awesome. And you know what? For this being, and see, this is the difference is like Zoe, or I don't know how to say it. He came in, this is his first race of the season and did amazing. Mick Schumacher hasn't done that well.
Yeah, they spun out. I think both drivers didn't do well. The 2 Haas drivers last year didn't do well this race.
Right. And like, granted, that might be partially the car, but now he's got a good car and still didn't do that well. Like the fact that somebody just getting on track their first season in an Alfa Romeo still does better than you, that should be the wake up call you need to like go back to the drawing board. Like something's not right.
Yep.
Well, it's going to be a great season, and we'll see where all those bottom teams end up at the end of the season.
That's good.
All right.
All right.
All right, guys.
We'll talk to you guys soon.
Cheers.
Cheers.